Hello, I'm with Caroline Dinenage today in Gosport.
Thank you very much for coming to see me. I'm Caroline Dinenage. I'm the Member of Parliament for Gosport and Leon Solent and Stubbington and Hillhead, and I've been doing this job now for, crikey, 9 years.
What I wanted to do was start off with when you were younger.
Yes.
You know, because you've sort of come a long way, and I was wondering what you wanted to be as a child.
Yes. I've been asked this before, and my earliest memory, and don't laugh, my earliest memory is wanting to be a nun. Because I went to a little convent school up in Waterlooville, my first school. Used to be called the Convent of the Cross, where we had a lot of nuns, and I thought they were very mysterious because you never saw their feet. They seemed to sort of float everywhere, which always seemed to be rather glamorous. And then I think I watched The Sound of Music one too many times.
Oh,
I
yes.
just remember being at a party with my parents. You know how I must have only been about 5 or 6, and you know how some adults are just really good at talking to children. I remember one nice lady saying to me, "What do you want to do when you grow up, Caroline?" and very earnestly telling her that I was going to be a nun. It didn't work out. I think I discovered boys and more generally discovered the sort of things you have to give up if you're a nun. So it didn't work out. But but then more generally, as I got older, I wanted to do something creative, something involving writing. I really quite wanted to go into journalism, or I used to write lots of plays when I was young. So something along those lines I would have liked to have done.
And you went to school at Waterlooville?
Yeah,
I
went to junior school at Waterlooville, then I went to secondary school at Bareham, at Wickham House, and then I went to Oakland's sixth form in Waterlooville, bizarrely with Penny Mordaunt, who's now
did you really?
Secretary of State for Defence. So
how funny.
I just 1 year apart at school, so I knew her from there.
Did you like school?
I liked junior school. I liked sixth form. I didn't like secondary school very much.
No, I don't think any of us do they?
Yeah, it was an all-girls school, and it was very academic, and I was more creative, more artistic-y, more sporty. So yeah.
So you then went off to university in Swansea, is that right?
So I took a year out and set up my own business. Because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I got really good A-levels. No one in my family. I come from a giant family. My grandmother
How big is your family then?
Well, my grandma was one of 9.
Wow.
And so they were all brought up in this neck of the woods. So effectively, I always say if you've got the name Smith and you live in the wider Portsmouth area, then I'm probably related to you. And the family lived here for generations. So my great grandmother's family were fishermen from Emsworth. So we're sort of deeply rooted in this part of the south coast. No one in my whole extended family had ever been to university before, and I sort of came out with this clutch of A-levels, and we all had a bit of a double take and thought, what on earth are we going to do with this? And so I took a year out to kind of decide, and in that year I set up my own business, and then eventually I did go off to Swansea University, mainly because it was on the beach, and I couldn't really imagine myself living anywhere too far away from the sea.
I'm a bit like that.
Yeah.
So with your business that you set up, what was it? What were you doing?
So it started because my mum had her own company. My mum brought over the idea of name badges from the US back in the 1970s, and then when I was a bit older, my mum bought out another business, and amongst the stuff came this vinyl plotter, about a sort of metre wide, and it's the sort of stuff you use it to cut out vinyl, and the vinyl letters you either stick on the side of a van, or you stick on a board to make a sign, or you stick onto a sort of bit of canvas to make a banner. And I said, can I have that? And she let me have this bit of kit, and I trained myself to use it, and I started selling these sort of things, and somehow managed to talk my way into getting the contract to do all the vehicles for the Southern Co-op dairies.
Oh my goodness, really?
So there I was, aged 19, sticking, with these 17.5-ton lorries, and me on the top of a step ladder. Probably health and safety would have had a field day.
How did you cut them then?
Cut on the vinyl plotter. Yeah, cut the stripes out on the vinyl plotter, peel it off from the backing, and then stick it on the side.
That must have taken some investment to get the equipment to start.
So the equipment came from my mum. She brought out this business.
Wow.
She had this bit of kit which they weren't using, so I asked if I could have it, and
Wonderful.
So the kit was. So I was very lucky. You know, I had this bit of kit that no one was using. I trained myself to use it, and the rest is history. So it started off as a sign making company.
Wow.
And I used to make. So when I decided to go off to university, I had to get someone in to run it for me. It was only a little sort of one-man band, really. But I met this amazing woman who had worked for a sign company before, so she came in to run it. And I used to print window stickers saying things like Swansea University BSc in Beach Studies. And I used to sell them to the university shop and flog them to other students.
I suppose signs like that then, it was quite new, wasn't it? It's quite, and it's, you know.
So these were little car window stickers that all the university students used to have. So I used to make a bit of money for myself at uni by selling those.
So you've always been an entrepreneur then? You've always had the...
Probably unemployable is probably the the other way of saying it. Yeah, I'm very business. I mean, I'm always thinking of ideas and interesting. I'm much more of a sort of an ideas enterprise sort of person than I am a sort of practical delivery person.
Yeah. So then from university, then where?
So back to the business. And it was running, and I was running the business, and then my mum got sick. My mum was very poorly, and she couldn't work for about a year. She couldn't work at all. So I moved. I was renting my factory unit. She owned hers. So I moved my business into her business and basically ran it for her. And we kind of realised that the two worked very well together. She had the name badges. I was doing the signage, and we sort of started expanding, and so one of our customers was B&Q, and they would come in and they'd say, we need 30,000 pens, and I think, well, that's a lot to turn down. So I'd sort of go off and find a pen supplier, and we'd do these pens. And so gradually and organically we sort of built up a business that was doing all the kind of promotional products as well. And we decided to merge our two businesses together. So that's what we did for many years. My mum and I, we ran our business together.
So where did your interest in politics come from then?
So that was just, so my degree, I did a degree which was English and politics, just because I was interested in it, not because I'd ever thought of having a career in it. And I had this lovely customer who was a retired brigadier who would come in, and because I was always interested in public affairs, in current affairs and news and politics and stuff, he would come in to order stuff, and then we would sort of shoot the breeze. And I was one day basically criticising the local council. It was Winchester was I lived in Denmead, and Winchester was our local council. And I was criticising them because my mum wasn't very well. She had pneumonia, and they had these green goddesses pumping the water all the time. In Hambledon was flooded where she lived, and they had these pumps pumping, and she couldn't get better. And I was basically criticising the local council, going, well, this blooming council, they're every few years Hambledon floods, and they never do any blooming thing about it, and they're all rubbish. Who is this local councillor? I don't know who they are, but they're rubbish. And this chap, this retired brigadier, said to me, well, if you don't like it, you should do something about it. And I said, well,
I hate it when people say that to you.
And that's like a red rag to a bull for me, because if anyone tells me I can't do something or I should change something, that's how I always used to get into trouble at school. So I didn't know that he was the chairman of the local Conservative branch, and they didn't have a candidate. And he said, it was 1998. Tories were very unpopular in 1998. I had, I was 25, 26, and...
so who was the leader then?
The leader of the Conservatives.
Yeah.
I think it was William Hague, I think.
Right, yes, yeah, I do remember that.
And so I stood for election, and it was a Lib Dem held seat, and it had been Lib Dems in there for quite some time, and I went out and I knocked on every single door in the ward, and I wore a bright yellow raincoat because it just rained every single night, but it had the advantage of lulling everybody into a false sense of security because they thought I was a Lib Dem coming up their drive. And I don't know how, but somehow I won that seat, and I was the only Conservative victory in Winchester Council that year. I was the youngest Winchester councillor ever by some margin, and so that's how it all started.
Wow. So you also, you've been secretary for women's rights, is that women's issues?
So I was Minister for Women and Equalities for a number of years. So I did that from 20...
Were you given that role, or did you actively seek?
I was given that role. So the way it works in Parliament is you there is sort of like a kind of a promotion So you start off, as a normal backbench MP, and then you can become a PPS, which is like a parliamentary private secretary to one of the ministers. So I was made PPS to Nicky Morgan, who at the time was Minister for Women and Equalities. And then in 2015 I was promoted and I was made Minister for Women and Equalities myself. Alongside another role, I was also in the Ministry of Justice. It's a sort of double-hatted thing. And then, so I did that for a couple of years. Yeah, I'm really passionate about it.
And what did you do while you were in that role? What was your, what would you say you're
so we did
you're most proud of?
Yeah, well, probably my most proud thing is putting through the gender pay gap legislation. That,
really? Did you?
We now know. So it had always been there in the Equalities Act, but it had never been triggered. So I put through the legislation that triggered the gender pay gap legislation, which is really good because, it's all about tackling the gender pay gap.
And it's still very much in the news today, isn't it?
Exactly right. So that was something I was very proud of. We also did a lot of work around trying to get more women on boards because when I first got elected, there was still quite a large number of FTSE 100 companies that had no women on their boards at all, and which beggars belief because you can't. How can people possibly understand the views of their customer base if they don't reflect them in any way, shape, or form in their management structure? So. By the time I left, there was no FTSE 100 company that didn't have at least one woman on its board, and we'd massively increased the number of the amount of women coming up through that pipeline as well into those executive roles. Yeah,
because you've helped. Because, like I said, we met up before, didn't we, at my sister's business group for women.
Yes.
My magazine is Worldwise Women, and it's about inspiring women.
Yes.
And getting women to leave their comfort zone and doing something.
Right.
Because we're our own worst critics, aren't we?
That's exactly right. And I'm just always been so passionate about inspiring women into business because it's something that I did. And but the only reason I did it was because my mum had her own business, so there was no fear for me in doing it.
You had a great role model, didn't you?
Yeah, it didn't seem like an unnatural thing to do. No. But for many women, we are our own worst critics, and men just seem to be born with much more sort of confidence in their own ability, whether it's founded or not. I've got boy children, and they just seem to have a much greater idea of their own self-worth.
Yeah, so does my son.
Which is always amuses me, particularly when they're bargaining for pocket money and things. So I've always been about just trying to encourage more, because it's self-perpetuating. The more women you have in these kind of roles, the more, I always say, if you can see it, you can be it. So if young girls coming up through school see women in positions of leadership, i.e. either running their own businesses or in government or in the top of big corporate companies, then they potentially see themselves in those roles in the future, and it all drives the next generation of brilliant, successful women.
Yeah, because I've been going to a lot of networking groups, and the women, you're totally right, the women are questioning themselves constantly, where the men are just, well, I'm doing this is happening.
Which is why female businesses succeed more than male businesses, because women have to have a lot more confidence in their own ability before they start them. So if far less women start businesses. If women were starting businesses at the same rate as men, then we'd have, hundreds of thousands of more businesses, and we'd sort of probably wipe out the trade deficit overnight, I would imagine. But female businesses succeed more than men because we tend to borrow less, because we're more risk averse, and we seem to have a lot more confidence in what we're doing before we even start.
Yes, that's very true.
That's right. But we were talking about how so many women say to me, I can't sell, Caroline, I can't sell my business. But you go to these meetings like the one we went to, and I just say, tell me about your business, what does it do? And they talk to you about their business and the passion that they have for the thing, because often women start businesses in something that they're very passionate about.
Yes.
It sells it itself. I came away from that meeting that we went to having bought nearly everything in the room. I'm nearly employed a cat sitter and I don't even have a cat because when they do talk about their businesses, they don't understand that they're selling it.
No.
But they're so compelling and so persuasive because of the passion that actually they are brilliant salespeople, but they just don't know it.
And they're also very good at getting information from people as well, aren't they?
Right.
Because they'll sit down with someone and they'll go into a general conversation, and before you know it,
yes,
they know everything about that person.
Exactly right.
So it's sort of using the skills that they have, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and women are, it's like people say to me, what about women in politics, and I think actually it's the same in business. Women have the sort of skills that women have naturally, that in abundance, are the sort of skills that you need to succeed in business and in politics. The ability to communicate, the ability to listen, the ability to empathise, the ability to multitask, the ability to get things done. All of these are skills that you need in abundance in politics and in business. And women have very largely women tend to have.
But they also have that nagging self-talk, don't they? Oh, you're no good. No, you can't do this.
Yeah, absolutely right.
So it's sort of overcoming that, isn't it?
Overcoming that, and the way you overcome it, I think, is by having strong female role models. So seeing other women out there who've done it. I think it's by having really good mentoring, having other, like you were talking about, the women around you that really encourage you. And I think, to have that little voice in your ear saying, come on, you can do this, you're amazing, you're going to be fabulous. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Madeleine Albright, the American political figure, said there's a special place in hell for women that don't support other women.
Really? I've not heard of that.
I agree with her. I think, we do have, whether it's women in business or politics or women in enterprise, we've got a responsibility to look around and help others who want to follow in our tracks. Yeah.
Yeah. I was also looking at your CV, and you do a lot of work with Douglas, the enterprise over there.
Yeah.
So where is that? Where is that going? Because there's loads going over there, isn't there?
It's amazing, isn't it? And so my very first meeting when I first became the MP back in May 2010 was at Daedalus, because so many times on the doorstep people had said, what's happening? So I contacted in those days was the local sort of what was it? I can't remember what it's called. The local development agency, CEDA. And said, can we have a meeting? And we had this blooming PowerPoint presentation where the first slide they spelt my name wrong, which never gets me in the right frame.
I better check.
Well, we're lucky, it's a podcast, you don't have to worry about it. But and then we just went through all these slides where they were just showing me all these slides of these houses they were going to build, and all these computer-generated women pushing computer-generated babies in prams up streets with people drinking lattes outside of cafes.
Okay, lovely.
And houses and houses and houses. And we got to about slide 3, and I said, I'm so sorry, I'm going to have to stop you, because is this all going to be like this? Because we don't need more homes in the Gosport Peninsula. We need jobs, and we need skills opportunities, and we need employment, and we need economic prosperity. And they sort of all looked at me a bit blankly, and then everybody started blaming everyone else. So I went away, and I decided I was going to set up a Daedalus strategy group, which would bring all the key players in that site, because it was a very complex site, different ownerships, different tenants, bring them all.
I live right near it, so I'm sort of watching and cycling through. And
so we got them all in a room, and it was in October 2010, and we started this Daedalus strategy group, and I chaired it, and everyone was there, from the Hampshire County Council, all the local borough councils, the Maritime Coast Guard Agency, the Homes and Communities Agency, the local enterprise partner, everyone you can think of, they were all there. And we basically met once a month or every 2 or 3 months for years and years and years, and we applied for enterprise zone status. We were one of the first enterprise zones in the country. And we've now got the CMAS, which has got 950 engineering students.
Wonderful.
We've got Digger School, CTEC, which has just won a national award for its apprenticeships in civil engineering. We've got the Business Innovation Centre, which was full within 3 months, and they've doubled it in size, and it's full again. We've got the business park, which again filled immediately, so they've now done a tie back at doubling that Daedalus business park, and some a little bit of housing, but not very much compared to how much employment there is. The big new hangars are going up, so it's been it's been a real labour of love.
I think it's nice for the people of the local area to see it actually developing and coming alive, because it sat empty and sat dormant for such a long time, didn't it?
And it was an area that just has so much incredible heritage. The history of that site is phenomenal, and you know what it contributed to our country and to D-Day and to our armed forces. And to see it sat there, you know, at one stage there was even plans to turn it into a quarry.
Really, I didn't know that.
I mean, can you imagine digging up the airfield and turning it into a quarry? You know, so now to see it, you know, the Spitfire goes from there. You know, people with far too
well, you could go down and sit in the airport in a cafe there and watch the planes.
And it's a beautiful cafe, and you know, people with lots of cash can pay to go in a Spitfire, but people with not much cash can go and sit there like me and have a latte and watch the world go by, and it's lovely. But now what we need to do, the most difficult part of that site is the waterfront bit, because that's the bit with all the accommodation, all the sort of contamination, all the sort of rundown buildings, lots of listed buildings.
Right, yes.
So that's the next stage. And that's the bit we're working with Homes England to try and transfer to Gosport Borough Council, so we can really begin to make some progress with that. Yeah.
So how long have you been MP now?
9 years.
9 years.
Yeah.
And what would you say, not your most personal achievement? It doesn't have to be a big thing.
Yeah.
For Gosport and
nationally, my biggest achievement was getting the medal for the Arctic Convoy veterans of the Second World War, and it was something I campaigned for before I was an MP, and something that, you know, they fought what was described as the toughest naval sea campaign of the Second World War, and they never got their own dedicated medal.
Oh, goodness.
And many of them died in the most treacherous of conditions, you know, freezing cold waters, constant bombardment by U-boats and aeroplanes, and they'd never got a medal. So that for me was sort of nationally was my achievement. But personally, you know, for me it's not, you know, the big ticket stuff like the enterprise zone are really important for Gosport, but personally it's always those individual stories where you can help individuals with their lives. You know, I had a lady that came to me who was very, very poorly with ME. No, what am I talking about? Motor neurone disease. She was she couldn't move. She was being peg fed, and her continuing care package hasn't kicked in, and her family was so worried because they were paying for her care and everything, and she was the most delightful woman. And I remember going to see her and making a phone call to the health people, and within 24 hours we got her care package kicked in.
Fantastic.
Now she sadly died literally only about 2 or 3 months later, but with that peace of mind, you know, and I even got invited to her funeral because her family felt that I'd really significantly improved those last few months of her life, and that to me is the greatest thing that you can do, if you can actually remove stress and worry from somebody or improve their lives or really sort of make a difference. That's the stuff that you really take away.
So do you you'd encourage people to go into politics, would you?
Well, I mean, I think it does give you the opportunity to really make a difference. You know, for me, I would never have wanted to do it just for the sake of doing it, but you know, I wanted to represent an area that I felt I had a genuine affection for. I didn't want to do. I wouldn't have could have travelled around the country to be an MP, but I think it's wonderful if you can be on the local council or be a member of parliament for an area that you genuinely feel like you could make a difference. And it's not, you know, it's not the easiest job in the world. You know, there's a huge amount of unnecessary public interest in everything that you do, and you know that does impinge upon the life of you, but also your family and your kids particularly. But you do feel, you know, once in a while you're able to do things that you really feel make a difference to people's lives, and there aren't, you know, not every job gives you that sort of opportunity.
Yeah, and also because a lot of young people don't really understand politics either, do they? You know, it's.
I think it's increasing though, you know, because when I used to go and visit local schools, there were very few kids doing politics. But now, you know, like when I go to Bay House Sixth Form, for example, or you know, others, it's packed that course, you know, and I think so. they seem to be, you know, whether that's because of things like Brexit, or, you know, the rise of some very high profile and Marmite characters like Trump, you know, but we've now got some big characters in international politics, and I think that actually young people have begun to recognise that politics does affect them,
and that
they can change things. So I think young people are a lot more engaged in politics than they have been in more recent times.
Well, I think that's all. I have all my questions are all answered.
Oh, good. I didn't avoid any of them, you see, and that's what they say about politicians. We don't answer the questions.
Well, I was going to ask you about Brexit, but you know, I'm not sure whether.
I think everyone's bored talking about it, aren't they? I think people want us to get on with it.
I think the environmental thing is quite important at the moment, isn't it, as well? Yes. But that's another reason why you were talking about young people going into politics.
Yes.
That's the next big issue with young people, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, because they rightly understand that this is their future we're talking about, you know, in the same way that Brexit is their future, that the environment is very much their future, and that we can all play such an important role. I've given up plastic for Lent for the last 2 years.
Oh, have you?
It's impossible. You can't do it.
No.
But because, you know, so much of the stuff we buy is just swathed in so much plastic. But it does force you to really examine your kind of your footprint and how much stuff you're throwing away. So I've made some changes in my lifestyle that I will keep forever. I think, you know, like I've gone from buying my washing powder in plastic bottles to buying it in cardboard boxes.
Well, we always used to have it in cardboard boxes.
It's like going back to the past. You know, I have my milk delivered in milk bottles now rather than buying it. You know, and I tend to very much more use the market for my fruit and veg and what have you. So there are little changes we can all make. That, you know, now I've started cooking pizzas at home. The children don't like shop bought pizzas anymore. I've created a rod for my own back, but you know, I mean, that's been a real eye opener for me, because we see it here right on the coast. You know, when you walk along the beach and you see all these little bits of plastic, these things which I was like, these look like Q-tips. They look like cotton buds. How can they? But they are cotton buds, because people put them down the loo, and they, because of the shape and size of them, they go through the water system and they end up in our seas. You know, it's only when you see something like that you think, crikey, you know, everything we do has such a massive impact on the world around.
And you're right, actually, because my niece and nephew will pick me up if I'm using a carrier bag or not putting it in the recycling bin. So they seem to be far more aware than I was.
Right.
Having them as my conscience almost, you know. Yeah. My niece sort of said to me, well, you're leaving us this world, you know, so...
Right. But, you know, you and I are old enough to remember... Actually, it's pretty much about like going back to the way we were, because I mean, you know, when I was a kid in the sort of 70s and 80s, you sort of
paper bags with your vegetables.
And you know, and you wouldn't things weren't swathed in plastic, and your washing powder did come in cardboard
and you
boxes.
didn't have those wet wipes around.
No, and you take your fizzy pop bottles back to the shop and you get back half a p or something for it, you know. And so life was a lot more sustainable in those days, and I think we do. It's almost like going back into the days of the past, but you know, which is quite comforting for someone of my age.
Well, it's been lovely chatting to you.
Lovely to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.